Welcome back to another episode of How to Become an Obstacle Buster. I'm your host, Warren Wandling, the show that's dedicated helping leaders to overcome obstacles, build resilience, and achieve success. And I have a great guest to help us do just that, Beau Turner. Welcome to the show, Beau.
Thanks for having me on, Warren.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. As the CEO and founder of Abundant Minds, you are reshaping how investors think about the future of finance. In fact, you raised the question, what if the next passive income stream is not in real estate or stocks, but in digital infrastructure? In fact, you help high net individuals generate passive income through fully minded Bitcoin mining powered in US-based infrastructure. Fascinating. Can you share with our listeners a little more about your background?
Sure. Well, before I was a professional Bitcoin miner, which is not a title that I think even existed a few years ago, I was an engineer in school by training and then went into real estate. So I was a real estate investor for about a decade. And that was my bread and butter, my source of income. That was my main asset class. Probably 90% or more of my net worth was in real estate at any given time. And I had always been interested in Bitcoin. I owned some Bitcoin for a few years, but like I mentioned, there weren't that many full-time jobs in the space, so I didn't think of it as a career to get into. But the events of 2020, I think, shaped a lot of re-engagements in how we perceive the investing landscape for a lot of people. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of kind of systemic change that was happening at that point. There's a lot of printing. There's a lot of, I would say, confusion about why Wall Street was doing so well and Main Street was not, while the world was shut down. And I saw personally, most of our real assets, our properties, also increase in value very sharply over a pretty short period of time. And I remember thinking at the time, this doesn't make any sense, really. There's kind of something off about this. And it forced me to relook at, where does value come from? What's actually backing up the things that we own? And is that value derived from something real or something that's kind of synthetic or systemic that's just sort of influencing prices without influencing underlying value? And I had enough background in Bitcoin at that point and a family that was very fond of sound money and gold to have the lens to look at the changing landscape and say, you know what? I don't think real estate's going to be the right asset for me, either in a value sense, but also in just a personal values sense. I didn't feel like I was necessarily contributing to the evolution of the world. And Bitcoin at that point, I was just ripe to receive all of the new information coming out. All of the Michael Saylor at that point was just starting to speak out about taking their corporate treasury and pivoting it to Bitcoin. So I was just very ripe to receive a new way of looking at the world. And that was the vehicle into Bitcoin mining. And my wife and I started out looking for a way to get into it that was more passive. We were looking for passive income in real estate. Spoiler alert, we never found it. And we were looking for it in Bitcoin mining as well. And unfortunately, our first experience was working with somebody to host our machines in their data center. And that was a $500,000 loss event for us because we just picked the wrong partner that did not care as much about running a good business as we now do. And so the company we have now, Abundant Minds, is out of that experience, looking to provide what we were initially looking for in the Bitcoin mining space, helping people understand this asset class, get into it safely, avoid the worst pitfalls. Selfishly, I love teaching, I love educating people about Bitcoin and the surrounding space, but it's such a perfect vehicle to educate people about some of the biggest changes that are happening in the world today. Things like how energy is becoming the master commodity. It always has been, but now it's a very acute sense. The financial system is being reinvented underneath us. Increasingly, our world runs on computing, and we get to touch all three of those trends and give people a vehicle to learn, understand, and whether Bitcoin mining is 100% of their net worth or 1%, they have all the same educational tools to navigate the world in a better way.
Yeah, fascinating. Interesting in reference to your real estate background, played a key role in your current position and probably more appreciation based on some of your experience as well as you entered into this market.
I can say that I never knew that creative financing in real estate, doing like subject to deals and owner finance deals and wraparound mortgages and everything under the sun, I never really thought that could translate outside of real estate. Turns out, if you are bootstrapping a company where you've got to acquire and build data centers, any sort of creative financing that you can put in place is a really helpful competitive advantage. So it did transfer pretty well.
So what's the greatest obstacle that your clients encounter?
The biggest obstacle that our clients encounter, I'll say it's twofold. One is operational complexity, and two is trust. So, because operationally this is a complex business to run, you end up having to put your trust in people. And unfortunately, this business has delivered a lot of people who you could not trust with your funds. I am a shining example of someone who is burned by that, but there's tens of thousands of other people who saw the promise of this industry but unfortunately had a bad initial experience. And so in many ways, we're just looking to heal that for them. And the technical complexity is very real. I mean, I remember thinking pretty naively because, engineers, once you understand something, you think that that means that it's all going to unfold pretty easily. So I thought I understood mining pretty well. And I did in a principle sense, but in a raw operational technical sense, there's a lot that goes into building and operating a data center that I don't think most people appreciate, from the power to the cooling to the networking. If any single leg of your stool goes down, the whole thing is down. So it's a very operationally robust business you have to run. And I think most people struggle with that and feel intimidated by that, rightly so, because there's a lot that goes into it on the back end.
Interesting. So if someone's really new to this world, how would you explain passive crypto infrastructure investing in the simplest terms that you can think of?
Well, we get into things like real estate because you can purchase an asset and that asset cash flows for you. Passively is a strong word to use there, but in a sense, it cash flows passively with minimal upkeep. And when you think about how can I recreate that in the digital world, because the world, the economy is increasingly becoming more digital, the native way that I found was Bitcoin mining. For those that don't know what Bitcoin mining is, you're essentially just plugging computers into an energy source, and those computers are doing work for you 24/7 to secure and help process transactions on the Bitcoin network, and you're paid in Bitcoin for that service. So think of it like having a 24-hour employee that's always performing these tasks for the network and then getting paid directly from the network. So it is a passive source of income. And just like real estate, it's a physical asset that is producing that income. The difference being, instead of getting a check from my tenant for whoever's staying in my property, I am getting directly paid in a digital asset, that being Bitcoin. And I like to say there are no truly passive streams of income. There's only things that are passive to you, but somebody else is doing work to make sure that that ends up truly being passive. In this case, infrastructure investing, buying these servers and having them run somewhere, it is passive for the people that work with us, for our clients. It is very much not passive for us. We are running a very operationally intense business to make sure that those things are on 24/7 across all of our facilities in Oregon.
Right. That's a really interesting distinction, that there's the passiveness in reference to the income stream is you can't just set it and forget it. There's definitely being involved, making sure that it operates 24/7 with probably redundancy in reference to that, making sure that happens.
100%. I think most people look for passive income, not realizing, or maybe they do realize and they're just still hoping that it's not going to be something that's operationally intense. I still have not found anything that's truly passive. Everything has some sort of setup or maintenance protocol. Even digital products need to be updated. So I think the quicker people can get around the fact that it may be passive for you, but there's almost nothing that's truly passive, the more successful they'll be, the more realistic their expectations will be.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in your opinion, why do most investors overlook Bitcoin mining?
We're still so early. This is a really profound technology, and it's still treated as sort of this very speculative vehicle, this high-risk vehicle, and maybe rightly so, because there's been so many examples of it blowing up for people. Not the technology itself, but many companies built on top of it have been mismanaged. So I think there's still a sense of, if you're serious capital, you can't take this industry seriously. And I would say we've only maybe crossed over into, yes, you can take it seriously fairly recently. You're starting to see much more conservative institutions get into this space and allocate serious capital to the space. But like anything that's truly transformative, it takes minimum years, usually decades, for anything sufficiently transformative to weave its way through the entire economy. A great example being, how how penetrated was the internet in terms of most people's daily use in 1995 versus 2026.
Yeah.
It's 30 years, which is a long time, but over the course of that 30 years, the landscape has completely changed in how you interact with that service. I think Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining are much the same. You know, they're a speculative kind of niche technology at this point. Less than 1% of all the capital in the world is allocated to it, but that's still a couple $1 trillion. So it's meaningful, but it's not meaningful in context yet to the largest pools of capital. But that said, I think fundamentally it's a great vehicle for these pools of capital, especially if they're already thinking about Bitcoin itself. Mining is just a more efficient way to acquire Bitcoin. And at least in the US, you've got pretty powerful tax advantages for having bonus depreciation that you can claim on that equipment. So a lot of our clients are actually not just looking to establish a Bitcoin position and get the passive income, but also same reason that many people hold properties is you can create income while generating a tax loss. And that is one of the most powerful levers that we get to pull and probably the most attractive feature, if you will, of the service that we offer to business owners and high net worth individuals.
Interesting. So what's the common pitfall in private Bitcoin mining?
Well, we mentioned a couple of them. It's operationally pretty intense.
Okay.
It's very challenging to find someone that you can trust in this space. I will say there's now thankfully some good companies out there, ours included, but it's been a challenging space to navigate from a pure selecting your partner sense for many years. And it's very easy to overlook the simplicity of the space, or it's very easy to oversimplify what goes into the operations. But in reality, you're dealing with energy procurement on a scale that most people have never managed before. You're dealing with heat mitigation and climate control that most people have never dealt with at any scale, networking and bandwidth that needs to be online at all times, and just the operational rigor of having people there to service the equipment. You know, things are going wrong all the time. Just accept in life and in business that it's your ability to deal with things going wrong all the time that determines whether you're successful or not. And I think people getting into this space without the appropriate resources and help do not understand quite yet how much goes wrong all the time and how prepared you need to be for that. I'll give you an example. We have several facilities in Oregon, and one of them, I'm grateful that we have redundancy and we've got, multiple facilities on different grids, but one of them we had a transformer go bad a few weeks ago. So this is a major piece of equipment, hundreds of thousands of dollars in infrastructure costs to get these things installed, procured, connected, and we had one go down from a manufacturer defect. So this was a major retrofit, a major install that we had to do that usually would take months for anybody who's just procuring on the market generally. And we were able to get one sourced and plugged in to replace the one that had gone bad within about a week, which is just unbelievable. But this event took a ton of operational rigor. It took our site ops team being there and present and problem solving pretty much all day, every day for while we were having this outage. And then on the back end, this is after all is said and done from all the tests, $250,000 event that you're making sure that all of your clients get back online. And most people are not set up to handle that sort of unforeseen casualty to your equipment, your critical infrastructure. So these are the sorts of things that can happen and do happen, and you have to be prepared for them in all ways.
Yeah, that sounds like a great leadership or entrepreneurial mindset in reference to how to be able to approach this space. Certainly if you're coming at it from a perspective of just passive income, because it's definitely investing your time and energies to be able to manage your mindset and the team that's servicing your clients.
I think the most important thing, and this is across all business, but definitely in ours, is giving your people a sense of ownership over their domain. When this event happened, I was traveling. I was at a conference thousands of miles away from being able to do anything, help anything on site. And in some ways that was a gift because if you're always there to fix everything as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, you never get to install that trust that occurs when you've seen your people handle really tough situations without you assisting. And that's a gift in its own way.
Yeah.
As challenging as it is to pay that much money to solve a problem, you don't really know who you're working with until they've been tested, until they've been challenged. And that is the great mark of, I think, any true business owner, not just
Mhm.
a business operator, but a business owner, is being able to trust your people with the most challenging situations without much help at all.
Yeah, that's really key insight because actually that creates leverage, which is in leadership, since it's influence, we want to create that leverage within our team to build that autonomy so they can be able to feel like they're contributing and adding meaning to their work.
Absolutely. And it's demoralizing for people when you don't let them
Mhm.
own their lane. I
Yeah,
mean,
very, yeah.
truly top talent wants to be autonomous, wants to. I saw a great outline of this. C players need to be told how to do it. B players need to be told what to do. A
Mhm.
players just want a worthwhile problem to solve.
Yeah, I love that simplicity. So, talking about trust, which is really critical, what have you learned from an entrepreneurial perspective of building your business in an industry that's really hard for trust for most people? They have skepticism approaching this industry.
It's such a multifaceted thing.
Mhm.
I'm developing trust with my team. People are developing trust with us who want to work with us. There's so many areas where you have to consistently deliver, and if you don't, immediately trust is fractured or broken.
Mhm.
And so it's a constant place where you're putting in effort to make sure that what you are promising is delivered upon.
Mhm.
And this is true for people on our team. It's also true for the people that we work with, is whatever you say you're going to do, you have to be able to do it.
Mm.
And especially in an industry where, most people are scared. I mean, most people are just scared to get into this industry at all. They see it as highly risky. They see it as very speculative. And so if you give any signal that they are right in holding that belief, it may be the last time that they ever even consider working with you. There's a very high bar, especially in a space where trust has been broken, to
Mhm.
deliver on being trustworthy. One of the things that we do to that end is many people see this whole industry, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, as sort of a black box. Like, I don't really know what I'm getting into or what I'm doing. And coming from the real estate space, you could always just go see your property. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a physical thing with an address you can drive up to and determine what the condition of it is. In many cases, people are shut out of getting really in-depth information and seeing behind the scenes in the industry that we're in. So we actually just got back from this past weekend. We had a site tour where people fly in from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, to
Mhm.
actually see what goes on behind the scenes, to actually lay their hands on the machines themselves, see the energy systems, see the infrastructure, see how it's all operated. Because so many companies and so many facilities have had bad luck and unfortunate circumstances that lead to a lot of client losses, we do our best to give people the vehicle that they can actually verify for themselves. How are they treating my equipment? How are they running this
Mhm.
operation? How do things look? Is it clean? Are they
Mhm.
actually doing preventative maintenance? Is it a fire hazard waiting to happen? You never know these things, and people are at a
Mhm.
minimum spending 5 to 10 grand with us, and in many cases multiple millions on these machines that are living in our facilities. You
Mhm.
want to be able to verify that they're being treated well, because how they're being treated determines what ultimately you make on the investment and how long it lasts, how long it produces for. So there's very few ways to verify that unless you
Mhm.
actually come and see it on site. And we do our best with tons of video content and, making sure that people don't have to travel across the country to see everything, but making that available to people has definitely been a huge trust builder. And going back to the team side, that's also their
Mhm.
opportunity to meet the people who are taking
Mhm.
care of their equipment. Their investment is
Yeah.
not necessarily being taken care of by me. I'm probably in the office doing more desk work most of the time. So you get a chance.
Are you a leader who's ready to go from stuck to unstoppable? It's time to stop leading on autopilot and start leading with purpose. Through my Leadership with Purpose program and next level coaching, you'll gain the clarity and confidence and tools to lead from within so you can make a greater impact without burning out. Build stronger teams, crush self doubt, lead with clarity and conviction, and unlock your next level of leadership. Don't settle for good leadership. Step into your greatness. Visit warrenwandling.com to learn more and start your journey today. Your next level of leadership starts now.
to actually meet the hands that are taking care of your equipment.
So if someone was listening today who's really curious but cautious, what's the first step that you encourage them to take?
I think skepticism is really healthy in this space, and it should be matched by curiosity. Being skeptical without having the counterbalancing curiosity to go and do more diligence and uncover more and ask more questions, I think is a disservice to any investor. Skepticism closes the door, but curiosity keeps it cracked open so you can just peep through a little bit gather some information, but not fully close the door on the opportunity. So I think education is probably one of the most important things that people can do. Again, that's part of why we do the site visits, is it's hard to replace getting a chance to see something in person. I remember my first time visiting a mining facility. It was years into owning Bitcoin, but that changed everything for me to understand how much operational intensity and capital intensity goes into securing this network, and experiencing it firsthand is really transformative. And so I think that continuing to seek out those experiences is probably the best use of time for an investor who's looking at this space, is still cautious. There's nothing that replaces building your own understanding. And if there's one thing that really, I won't say it's a pet peeve, but it is a frustration, is that most people don't take charge of their own financial lives. They shove off the responsibility to an advisor, an asset manager, wealth manager. Not that it's bad to have those things, but you have to build your own mental model of how all of it works well enough that you can question what they're doing, that you can understand why they're doing it. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of people's lives. And especially in entrepreneurship circles, there's such a strong emphasis on making money. And usually people are quite good at making money. But when it comes to understanding what money is, or how to keep it, or how to invest it appropriately, that's typically a wide open gap, because it's a very different mindset than building a business. So for anybody who's looking at this, who is an entrepreneur, I would say getting into the mind of the curious investor is the way to approach this. There's plenty of pitfalls. I've hit quite a few of them myself, but those are in many cases the most valuable things that you get, are the personal experiences that teach you how to navigate something better.
So what's one obstacle that you've overcome building Abundant Minds?
You know, the biggest one, I would say, is just that initial loss event that my wife and I experienced. You know, $500,000 is a lot to lose for anybody. At that point, we were also engaged for just about a week. So we're hoping to spend some money on something fun at that point.
Yeah.
And get married. And so that was a pretty big damper on the business. That was a pretty big damper on us personally as well. And that said, you know, obstacles are the vehicle for creating meaningful change. And so we had an idea of what we were going to build with this business when we were first getting into it before that experience. And it was a very different business that materialized on the back end of that experience. And it was in many ways crafted to solve that problem that we had, that personal pain that we had. Most of the best companies that I've seen have been designed to solve a specific personal problem. And up until that moment, I didn't have a specific personal problem in the Bitcoin mining industry that I could point to and say, I'm trying to prevent this from happening to other people. And in the aftermath of that, you know, it was a very, very painful experience emotionally. But in the process of solidifying that into wisdom, it turned into every great thing that we built in the company to heal that, both for ourselves and for future people who would work with us. So as challenging as those experiences are, they're also very rich with the ability to turn into the most triumphant victories if given enough time and care in the gardening of the initial, we'll call it, you know, fermented crap turns into fertilizer at some point.
Yeah, great insight in reference to working through that obstacle, because that could have ended that direction, your career in this space. But obviously you chose to embrace it and to be able to learn and lead into it. So what other lesson that you might be able to share for our listeners that you've gathered through your journey in building your business?
You know, the entrepreneurial journey, I think, is maybe the best personal growth journey you can personally embark on. And I can speak for myself that having our first site built was just me and an engineer. You know, it was just two of us. There wasn't much management required at that level. Having 25 people working for me at this point requires a very different version of me. And at every stage, from 2 to 5 to 10 to 15 to 25 people, I've had to become a different sort of leader. And the ways that I showed up in the beginning were, I could do everything. I'd do the engineering, I'd do the site planning, I'd do, initial marketing and customer acquisition. I mean, just about everything I had my hand in. At a certain point, that became a critical liability that I was involved at all. And you still want the ability to oversee it and the ability to have visibility into it. But to the degree that you are implementing many parts of your business, the further on in the journey, you are becoming such a bottleneck and such a critical risk. So my personal way of thinking about being in this business now is all about, how do I remove key man risk from myself? How do I take off pretty much anything that's critical operations so that anything can happen and it doesn't need to rely on me to be fixed? Because once you achieve that level of being removed from daily operations, at least personally, I love being in the creative space. I love being in the visionary space. And to the degree that I can separate myself operationally, the more I can be involved in casting a wider vision and making something truly compelling. And I think it's the death by 1,000 paper cuts that many entrepreneurs face, that as you're going through that journey of building revenue, adding team members, adding complexity, that it's so easy to let all of the additional complexity that comes through that process directly drain your energy, when the most important thing you can do is guard it, systematize, and delegate everything that you can so that you can continue to be the point of the spear. Because that's really what people need from you, is they need someone who's leading with a vision. And it's very challenging to have a clear and compelling vision when you're drained by doing your own bookkeeping, for example.
Yeah, great insight in reference to that change from a leadership perspective as you scale the business. So as you're leaning forward, what are any special projects that you're currently working on?
Right now we are just building and scaling the existing business. We went from a single site to we have 6 operating now. We're building 2 more. Those are all in the state of Oregon. So we're pretty geographically concentrated, even though there's redundancy and spread across multiple utilities. So our next big projects after we complete those 2 that are in construction is actually to do a multi-state expansion. So we're looking places like Texas, potentially North Dakota, maybe a little bit in British Columbia and up north. But we're really just looking to diversify across geographies in this next phase of the business. And while we're not putting a huge amount of resources toward this right this second, it's definitely on the map for almost everybody who's in Bitcoin mining is thinking about what's your AI strategy. We are building the pretty foundational infrastructure that usually ends up being quite useful to these hyperscalers and companies that are building AI data centers. So as a previous real estate investor, or current, depending on if you want to, classify me as a sort of data center developer or as a real estate investor, I'm always looking at these projects through the lens of, what else could this be? Is this just a Bitcoin mining facility, or is this the beginning of something else? So even though that's not something that we're putting a huge amount of bandwidth in the back of my mind, every deal that comes across my plate, I am thinking, what else could I do with this? Is this the highest and best use case for this?
Yeah, fascinating. Well, obviously, because that industry is definitely a lot of opportunity just in that industry alone in AI. So very fascinating. So I know our listeners will want to be able to connect with you. What's the best way, Beau, for them to be able to reach out?
The easiest way to get directly in touch with us would be on the website, abundantminds.com. That'll give you ton of information as well as links to book call with me or my team. If you are in the learning journey and you're just kind of figuring things out, we do our best to put a lot of free education out there. I'd say our YouTube channel, if you just search Abundant Minds, you will find our YouTube channel. That's got our podcast, lots of long form videos, short explainer videos of how all these things work. I'd consider that a great learning resource for those people who are just dipping their toe in. And if you find us on social, we're on pretty much every platform. Just search Abundant Minds and you'll find us.
Well, excellent. Well, I'll make sure those links are in the show notes.
Appreciate that, Warren.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Beau, for all of the strategies and tips that you've shared with our listeners. Hopefully, those that are curious and cautious, hopefully they'll be able to move forward now with some of those great resources.
Absolutely. If there's anything that I've learned, it's that the learning journey is worth it on its own. And if you never put a dime into Bitcoin or anything Bitcoin related, learning about it is such a great mirror to hold up to the rest of your life because it flies in the face of how we've designed many of our legacy financial, energy, computing systems. And if all you do is get a little thread to pull on to be curious about that helps you understand how the world is changing, I've done my job.
Well, perfect. Hopefully that has been raised that question for today. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks, Warren.
Yeah, this is your host, Warren Wandling, saying until next time, be an obstacle buster and be resilient. Are you a leader who's ready to go from stuck to unstoppable? It's time to stop leading on autopilot and start leading with purpose. Through my Leadership with Purpose program and next level coaching, you'll gain the clarity and confidence and tools to lead from within so you can make a greater impact without burning out. Build stronger teams, crush self-doubt, lead with clarity and conviction, and unlock your next level of leadership. Don't settle for good leadership. Step into your greatness. Visit warrenwandling.com to learn more and start your journey today. Your next level of leadership starts now.